As a guy born in 1965, I've certainly made quite a shift in my position on this issue. Not that my position matters in the grand scheme, but I've noticed a lot of people from my relative generation have struggled with understanding gender identity. When gender identity first became a public issue, I scoffed at it. After decades of living in a social paradigm that tied gender directly and exclusively to biology, my bias was so entrenched, I reacted to it with disdain, basically. I've never had any moral issue with LGBTIQ+ community as a whole. It doesn't cause any suffering if my neighbor identifies as a gender other than their assigned gender. It neither breaks my back nor steals my stuff. However, I still had issues with some of what was being advocated for. Mostly it came off as another group attempting to press their opinions onto society. I was already weary from other such groups, and generally opposed that sort of thing vehemently. However, I also knew I wasn't well informed, and I try to live by the notion that we should approach these things with the idea of, maybe I'm wrong, instead of, I'm right, they're wrong. So, I took a deep dive into the issue. It wasn't easy at first. I went online and started engaging people and got a lot of vitriol, but I think I know why. I think they expected I was the I'm right, you're wrong type, and figured I was going to try to drop a gotcha bomb on them. I wasn't looking to do that, but I get why they would think so. Eventually, I found people who were willing and able to explain things, at least from their perspective. Once they realized I was honestly examining it, it got easier. At first, was understanding the idea of gender as a social construct, separate from biology. After years of living in a paradigm that is diametrically opposed to that idea, it took a bit to understand. However, I did come to understand it. A good punch in the gut, though, in realizing I was invested in a paradigm that's neither objective nor subjectively sound. So okay, gender is a social construct, but if that's the case, and the current social construct is thus, then who are you to simply decide to change the construct? A nice knee-jerk reaction if I do say so myself, which received a nice smack back. Those who identify as a gender other than what they were assigned at birth deserve the same basic human respect as anyone else. They have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, without being bullied, mocked, or dismissed. If someone identifies as a man and/or a woman, they should be treated as a man or a woman. And I realized that my question was confusing the right to advocate for change of something clearly discriminatory and forcing others to agree. To advocate for the change of a social construct that at best dismisses an entire group of people and at worst blatantly discriminates against them is not imposing yourself on others. To oppose that is silly, but more importantly, cruel. But then I started seeing stuff online that wasn't about transgender folks simply wanting to be treated like human beings. I started seeing the pronoun issue escalate into what seemed like absurdity. Not talking about legitimate trans identity, but about people changing pronouns like outfits, sometimes weekly. It looked performative, like concocted drama. And I saw that as watering down the serious nature of the issue. I think there were people from even the trans community that weren't too pleased by it. The problem is, even if that group represents a tiny minority, just a fraction of a percent, that's still a lot of people in a population of 340 million. It's easy for people to compile anecdotal examples and present them as the poster children for the community. It doesn't just happen with this issue. There are endless amounts of compilation content on just about anything you can think of. The motive is clear, to paint a false perception. Fairly easy to see past, if you're willing. The truth is, it's not the norm. Most people don't change their pronouns the way they change their hairstyle. Alright, to keep this from just being a ramble session, here are the questions I asked at one time or another, and the conclusions I've drawn after listening to the answers, examining it thoroughly, and then asking those same questions of myself now. 1. We basically already covered this, but if gender is a social construct, then it's the opinion of society. So who are you to decide that for everyone? Fair question. But no one's demanding society erase all traditional gender ideas. People are asking for room within the structure, not to burn it down. Society evolves, norms shift. We didn't stop recognizing right and left-handedness. We just stopped punishing people for being left-handed. Same concept. 2. If I disagree with your life choices, why shouldn't I be allowed to voice that? I'm not harassing anyone, just sharing my opinion. And you can share your opinion. The issue isn't disagreement, it's how it's delivered. There's a difference between "this doesn't sit right with me" and "these people are delusional freaks." Tone matters, and basic empathy doesn't cost anything. Also, While we all have the right to share our opinions, we should expect a response relative to the intensity of the content and the number of people hearing you. Just because you hold an opinion doesn't make it reasonable. I can't help but take a stab at those who believe it's sexually immoral, because God said, in some iteration or another. You may as well say, because I say so. 3. If pronouns are about gender identity, then what's with all the silly ones, like Fae and Bunself? Non-binary I understand, but I must admit I do not understand all the crazy pronouns. Are people just sitting in rooms making this stuff up? Though it doesn't matter. It's not an inconvenience. The very question misses the point. 4. If gender has nothing to do with biology, then why do transgender people go to such extremes to change their biology? This took me some time to understand. Intuitively, it did seem to be a contradiction, but the problem is in the angle with which I was viewing it. I was rigidly looking at it as gender does not equal biology. Yet, transgender equals change biology. A cut and dry, almost mathematical point of view. Gender identity is internal. It's how someone understands themselves. Biological transition is about aligning their outer self with their inner identity. It's not a contradiction. It's a reconciliation. That was tough to get. I had to realign my angle of perception to match the angle they're actually coming from. We're not robots, we're people. So gender is separate from biology, but changing one's biology to match how one feels does not contradict that. It's actually two separate things. They're not trying to erase biology. They're trying to stop feeling like strangers in their own skin. I really hope I'm explaining that properly. It's honestly not all that easy to explain. So there it is. My original stance to where I am now, after about 2 or 3 years, I guess. Since then, I haven't really spoken much about it. However, since deciding to make content, I was hoping my shift might inspire some understanding in others. Not everyone from my general time period is locked in their mindset. Can't do much about those unwilling to consider it, but to those who are, who knows? Thanks for watching.